This is Beyond the Broadsheet, a Lincoln County News production and podcast where we sit down with members of our community and we talk about the news. For those who don't know, the Lincoln County News is a newspaper based in Newcastle, Maine, and we cover news events that happen in the 19 towns of Lincoln County. So with us today is me, Johnathan Riley. I'm a reporter here at the Lincoln County News. I cover a few towns for us. And we have, who else do we have here in the studio?
Oh, well, we have me. I'm Piper Pavelich, also a reporter with the Lincoln County News.
And I'm Molly Rains. I cover Waldoboro, Jefferson, and Somerville for the Lincoln County News. And we have our lovely editor, Maya Zewert.
Hi, I will mostly be silent unless I need to jump in and make fun of someone or correct someone.
Which I think you might need to do.
Probably need to do.
Probably.
It's a fun time.
So it's a kind of a treat to have all three of the reporters in here today. We usually pair off and do
all
this.
Four.
Yeah.
We also have a little dog here.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Yes.
How could you forget?
The little dog feels like she's not feeling well right now.
We have our company mascot, Hedgehog, also in the studio.
Hedgehog is an 18-year-old Pomeranian from Aroostook County.
Yeah, well, from Waldo County, adopted from Midcoast Humane.
Huh.
Yeah.
Shout out to Midcoast Humane.
Yeah.
So this week, all three of us will be going over the news first, what we did this past week on the front page, and we're going to take a deeper dive into that. And also, later in this episode, we're going to sit down with publisher John Roberts and hear a little bit more about the process of actually printing the paper. In our episode last week, we talked a little bit about what does it mean to put down a plate for the paper.
Yeah, I think at one point you made a joke about it being like a dinner plate.
Yeah, what do you mean plate? And he's like, well, yeah, it's about etching color saturation. I'm like, none of those things mean anything to me.
Yeah,
so we will be sitting down with John to hear a little bit more about the jargon, the process, and sort of the importance of printing a newspaper. For our listeners who want to know, we have a physically large paper, and we get to hear from John later about why that is. And now for the news from the Week 51, December 19th edition of the Lincoln County News. Piper, you did a wonderful piece about a beloved community member over in Wiscasset.
Yeah, I've had a few pieces lately, unfortunately, about some really wonderful community people passing away. This week, I got to dive into the life of Tim Flanagan. Mm-hmm. He was a teacher and coach at Wiscasset High School, now Wiscasset Middle High School. And I got to talk to a few people that knew him really well. And once again, it was just an honor to be able to dive into somebody's life that way and get to put on a page what this person meant to the community. So
yeah, it seems like he was a really significant part of it. And from what I remember, he led the boys basketball team over in Wiscasset to their first and I think only state championship.
Yep, only one in the history of Wiscasset High School.
Wow. For now. You never know. Wiscasset, great shots being put up over there. And he was recently, or in 2023, he was inducted into the Midcoast Hall of Fame, Sports Hall of Fame.
No, he was not.
Oh, sorry.
His team was.
The
there team that won the championship. Yep.
Oh, fantastic.
It was the 1991 team, and they were honored by the Midcoast Sports Hall of Fame. It was funny because I was actually talking to Tom Meller. He's the president of the Midcoast Sports Hall of Fame and was friends with Tim Flanagan. And he was saying that Tim should have been inducted into the Hall of Fame, but he was just too humble. He didn't want the nomination. So.
Well, that's very sweet. Well, he sounds like a wonderful person, and I'm glad you were able to put a piece in last week's paper, sort of memorializing him. elsewhere on the front page, we a little bit of national news here in Lincoln County, Maine. The Frances Perkins homestead in Newcastle was declared a national monument by President Joe Biden on, was it December 16th, on Monday? So very recently. And for those of you that aren't familiar with Frances Perkins, she was the first female member of a president's cabinet. I think it was and she was the longest serving member or Secretary of Labor from what was it? It's like a 12-year period. She is still the longest serving Secretary of Labor. And actually the building that the Department of Labor is housed in is called the Frances Perkins Building in Washington, D.C. So the homestead in Newcastle, her family owned it. Her father was born in the area. And so she had a lot of close ties to the Damariscotta, Newcastle area. And in her later years, even called that place home. And so Joe Biden and the administration declared it a national monument, which preserves it and is a culturally significant spot in Lincoln County. It's Lincoln County's first national monument, and it's the state of Maine's second. The first being Katahdin Woods and Waters.
Katahdin Woods and Waters.
Woods and Waters, yeah, which is a slightly larger national monument. This is 2.3 acres of a 57-acre plot on the Damariscotta River in Newcastle. That was the Frances Perkins homestead. That is what was recently declared a national monument. But the Katahdin Woods and Waters was about 86,000 acres. It was a huge, very different.
Yeah. So we have these two very different plots of land. Can you just explain what it means to become a national monument? Like, what's going to change?
Yeah, so I know that there is going to be some collaboration between I don't remember, is it the Department or National Park Service and the nonprofit that's overseeing the homestead, the Frances Perkins Center. There'll be some collaboration about creating space for visitors and maintaining that area. So, but it's mostly a designation that is significant because through the Antiquities Act of 1906. Presidents are given the ability to basically preserve things that are, whether it's a natural area like Katahdin Woods and Water. Woods and Waters, plural?
Yes.
Woods and Waters, I'm sorry, not wood and water. And Katahdin Woods and Waters is, it's important because of its natural preservation, and this is a culturally significant thing. So it sort of just ensures that these things that are important to the American identity, culturally, socially, and naturally, will be preserved for generations to come, and it will immortalize and honor the efforts of Frances Perkins, whose work not just as was seminal as a woman in American history, but also for the working class, establishing 40-hour work week, minimum wage. She was one of the architects of the New Deal. And for those of you who don't know what the New Deal is, you can look it up.
I thought it was your job to tell people, Jonathan.
Oh, yeah. Well, if you don't know, don't be afraid of the Google search engine.
Jonathan, I want to just say you probably made Mr. Omani very proud of all that American history you retained.
Oh, well, Mr. Omani, who is our only listener. Mr. Omani is a history teacher at Lincoln Academy, and also a former teacher of mine. So shout out Mr. Omani. He taught me a lot of things, and I remembered not a lot of them, except about Frances Perkins. And so it's a really cool day for really like the working class of America, and also to immortalize the contributions that of women and celebrating women in American history. And so there are a lot of intersections about why this is important, and we are lucky here in Lincoln County to be able to house that monument. It's right on River Road. If you don't know what it looks like, it just looks like a house. And it is because it is just a house on the side of the road. It's very cool. So go check it out. It's at 468 River Road in Newcastle. I'm sure that we will start to see some increased traffic over there.
Oh, yeah, probably.
Yes, we can hear Hedgehog on the mic.
Oh, no.
And that's quite all right. That's Hedgehog. Hedgehog is
hilarious.
panting because she is excited about Frances Perkins.
Who wouldn't be?
She loves labor rights.
Absolutely.
All right, Piper, you wrote about some changes we've had at the county level this week
Yeah.
recently with some EMA leadership shifts.
Yeah, so the former EMA director, his name's Maury Prentice, he has filed suit in Lincoln County Superior Court because he is trying to appeal his termination. He was fired back in August following an investigation into a complaint about sexual harassment. So he is alleging that he was fired without cause and that the county did not follow proper procedure in regard to his termination. So he is requesting his job back as well as any missed wages since he was let go back in August.
Wonderful. So we'll be hearing about how that proceeds.
Yeah.
Elsewhere on the front page, we had what was going on in Newcastle with the lawyer Molly.
There's a Newcastle lawyer, Ed Dardis, who was suspended in January 2023 and disbarred in early November. We have an article about it in this week's paper through a content sharing agreement with the Bangor Daily News, and it was authored by their Mid-Coast reporter, Jules Walkup. The reason that he was disbarred is it's believed an assistant for Dardis wrote some checks inappropriately from an account that held clients' money. He has said that he had no idea about this, but the court determined that he wasn't properly supervising his attendant or addressing the issue, and that resulted in his disbarment.
Wow.
Yeah. It's not all sunshine here
Yeah,
in
seriously.
Lincoln County.
But it looks like he can apply for reinstatement to the bar for the next 5 years, so I'm sure that we'll have some updates.
Yeah.
Beautiful. We'll be looking forward to hearing about that. We covered this last week, but in Edgecombe, there was a mistrial was declared in the case of a man charged in the death of a 3-year-old on Christmas Day in 2022.
If you listened to last week's edition of the podcast, you heard Associate Editor Sherwood Olin speak about this, but we had it appear in the print trial, the print version of the paper this week, that there was a mistrial in the case of a man charged with an Edgecombe 3-year-old.
The death of an Edgecombe 3-year-old, yeah. So if you'd like to hear a little bit more about the process of what happens when we print a story that has suddenly been updated, check out last week's episode where we go into that detail, and we also go into the detail of the trial. And this week's character was Robert Clifford, a South Bristol resident, or Walpole, a village within South Bristol. Robert Clifford is the former owner of Colby and Gale Incorporated, which is a fuel service and energy company here in Lincoln County. It's housed in Damariscotta. Mr. Clifford is a really active human in the community, and it was a lot of fun getting to sit down and interview with him. Both Robert and I are part of a pretty exclusive club here in Lincoln County of people who graduated from Lincoln Academy and then attended and graduated from Florida State University.
Oh.
So there are not a ton of us here, but
You don't say.
yeah. So Mr. Clifford had a great time down there at FSU, but also joined the Army and was put in charge of curating and overseeing military clubs. And so it was really interesting to hear about that process and that journey for him from organizing military clubs, which was more or less a restaurant, an event center for military personnel, to being the owner of one of Lincoln County's largest energy companies. So make sure to check that out in this week's edition. And Robert, if you're listening, thank you very much for sitting down with me. It was a lot of fun. And Robert got to describe how he maintains trails between his house and his kids' homes, which are in the area. They're a walkable distance, so he maintains trails in between them. And he was describing how some Sunday mornings grandkids will just show up on his front step asking for maple syrup. And I think that's just the most lovely vision. And that's what the dream's all about, to live near your kids and grandkids and still contribute to the community. So Robert is a founding member of the Community Energy Fund, which we wrote our editorial about this week, or inspired our editorial. And because this holiday season, it's about giving, and the Community Energy Fund has given $2.5 million to people who need fuel assistance and some other financial needs in Lincoln County. And so in that spirit, we're encouraging other residents of Lincoln County to give what they can. Maybe that's just time and volunteering in the area. And there are a ton of organizations that are doing a lot of wonderful work in the area. So I can't think of all of them off the top of my head, but there are a ton. And I know that we have done a lot of writing about them. So check out the Lincoln County News on any given week, and you're going to see those fine folks in between the pages.
Piper, do you want to talk about sports?
I can talk about sports, yeah. I don't know if you guys had a chance to read this or to see this, but there was a sports story on our front page this week about two friends who have completed marathons in every state.
Yeah.
Whoa.
I can't imagine what that
every
would
state
do.
of the United States?
Yeah,
every
all 50 states.
Emotional state? Like, what
Maybe
are we
every
about?
Emotional state. I
I
don't know.
would guess
but
that the answer to that is yes, too.
at the very least, in all 50 states of the United States. So Deb Taylor from Wiscasset and Andrea Di Benedetto from Woolwich, they were former coworkers at Wiscasset High School, and they have been working on completing a marathon in all 50 states for the last 20 years. And they finally did it on December 8th at the Honolulu Marathon in Hawaii. So if you think about this, they would have run over 1,300 miles together.
Oh my goodness. And
Did you just do that math, or is that's incredible? What do you mean?
I guess.
I'm going to jump in here because Paula and I actually went back and forth on this. Paula Roberts, the sports reporter extraordinaire who wrote this article. We realized it was likely way more.
Oh, yeah, with the training and everything probably as well.
So they run 4 times a week. So between their training runs, which can run between 3 miles to 20 miles, plus the 26.2 miles in 50 marathons. Plus, they've also run more than just those marathons together.
Oh, yeah.
But with all of that combined, we figured out they probably ran the circumference of the Earth, and from Miami, Florida, up to Anchorage, Alaska.
Oh my goodness!
And we double checked the math, and it's when you think about that, you're running for 20 years, 4 days a week, and also 50 plus marathons. That's a bonkers amount of mileage.
Super cool. They must really like each other. I don't know if I can do that with somebody.
Well,
that's very cool.
Deb Taylor is 53 and Andrea is 65. So that means that they started this when they were 33 and 45, which is
it's been a long time coming.
Yeah, it's amazing. That is a harrowing prospect for me right now. I just turned 30, and I'm like, nah, I don't know. All 50 states? I can watch it on YouTube.
Give it 3 years. Maybe you'll change your mind.
That's true. Oh my gosh. Well, Deb, I'm going to call you up. I'm going to see and just to hear about what prompted that at 33.
Yeah, it's super cool they ended in Hawaii. I hope they took some time to sit on the beach after that.
They didn't mention that, for a lot of them, their families weren't able to be there or were at home, but they flew out to Hawaii to celebrate with them. So I think that's really cool.
You would have to. I mean, that's the finish line there.
Super tough sell. Oh, yeah. Oh, it's in Hawaii.
I guess I'll go.
That's tough.
Hawaii in December, Oh, even.
no.
Oh, no.
Yeah. I held out on Nebraska in January. Oh, that one I'm busy. I'm going to be washing my hair that month.
Oh my goodness.
Well, very cool. Well, really excited. Congratulations to Deb Taylor
Yeah,
and
huge
Andrea.
congratulations to both of them. That's a huge deal. And also on the sports front from Madomic, we have a couple twin brothers, Grady Pease and Seamus Pease, who won their respective weight classes at the Gardner Tiger Wrestling Tournament, which is very exciting for a brother act to both win first place. That was reported by our sports reporter, Mick LaBelle.
Very cool. Yeah, that's quite the accomplishment. I wonder between the two of them who's the better wrestler.
Oh, right.
Weight class
they're definitely
Yeah.
arguing about that.
It's good, I guess, that they're in different weight classes because otherwise I bet their house would just be like crazy.
Oh, yeah.
They're definitely tussling anyway.
Oh, yeah.
Well, Molly, you were able to sit courtside to the Lincoln County Commissioners honoring our longtime reporter,
Yes.
Charlotte Boynton. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, very special. Charlotte Boynton has been covering the Lincoln County Commissioners for 25 years, which is as long as I've been alive. And she has been a dedicated local journalist and very civically engaged person for much longer than that. So to be able to sit at a meeting of the commissioners with her was very special. She stood up at the beginning and told them that she was going to be stepping back from covering the meetings. And I think to come to terms with that, everybody was a little bit surprised. And they really appreciate and said to her that they appreciate her dedication to covering them and what they do. And then I got to call her up and talk to her a little bit about what she's learned. And she was just talking about how much the county does for folks that she feels like people don't recognize and the importance of bearing witness to that and recording it in local news. And she's definitely, I would say, an inspiration for all of us.
Oh,
she's 92 and she's reporting highly accurately, very dedicatedly. So it's great to know her and to be able to witness that with her.
Wow. Well, that sounds like a special conversation. And it sounds like both the commissioners in Lincoln County has been blessed to have had Charlotte.
Totally. I talked to County Administrator Carrie Kipper on the phone, and she said, "Oh, Charlotte's a legend." And I was like, yeah, that pretty much sums it up. And she also said that she is also a dear friend. And I think it seems like that is the relationship that Charlotte has with all the commissioners. And then at the same time, there's kind of a new generation of county commissioners coming in right now. This is happening in the next few weeks. So I think Charlotte felt like with her hearing, she has some hearing difficulties. She felt like it was time and maybe a fitting time to step back from the role. But I know that she'll miss it, and we will miss having her in that role as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm glad you were able to speak with her.
Me too.
And I do want to say Charlotte is not retiring, though.
Yeah, no,
She
not
will-
yet.
She's still going to be covering the Westport Island community, and she will also still be writing features about local veterans, which is really an area in which she shines and has
definitely.
a passion for.
Yes,
Definitely.
we're so lucky to have her.
Yeah.
Charlotte, if you're listening, hi, my name's Johnathan. Hi. I think we met one time, but if that is not true, then hi. Very cool. That has been the news, right? Or do we have anything else we need to cover on the front page within the folds?
Oh goodness, there's always so much going on.
One
Get
little
to all of
county,
it.
so much news.
So much news, one little county. And you
Yeah.
know what? If you don't feel like we've covered everything, go pick up the paper and read the rest of it. How about that?
We wrote it. We wrote
We
it.
wrote it, so go read it.
We typed it in this building.
All right. In the studio with us today is John Roberts, the publisher here at the Lincoln County News. Hey, John.
Hey there, how are you guys?
Oh,
Oh, we're just lovely.
loving it. Having a great time. So we are excited to have you in the studio today. We thought that it would be really cool for our listeners and those listening to the podcast and our readers to hear a little bit about the process of printing the paper and sort of the nitty gritty, the details. In one of our episodes recently, we were talking about putting plates down for the paper, which doesn't make sense in the world of words and saying things. So can you walk us through the process of publishing the paper?
Sure, I'd love to. I heard that I had to maybe come on and correct the record a little bit because
maybe
the editor might have been speaking about the production piece. So
I don't remember.
We tried our best.
Yeah, I think that the editor did a great job the last time we spoke about it. But we wanted to hear a little bit more about it.
Sure.
So from inception to how we get it on the stands.
We write the stories.
Yeah, we
do
that part.
Send them to Maya. She edits them. And then she puts them in a folder and they go upstairs here and get laid out.
A folder in a computer.
And that's about as much as I know personally.
Yeah, I mean, a lot's changed over the last couple decades in printing, especially printing here. So we start everything up to the point of the plate, which you mentioned is in the digital realm now. So all the pictures, even if we're taking older pictures, we're scanning them into a digital format. We're editing them digitally, and then we're laying out the page digitally as well. So all that stuff, the proofing process, we print out paper copies because it's a lot easier to catch typos when you're looking at a paper copy instead of a computer. So up to the point of making the plates, everything is digitally done. And then we have two plate makers that take that digital image and print it onto a aluminum plate that has a photosensitive surface. So a laser controlled by the computer goes and it adjusts the dot size and how many dots to make all the different images. So if we're looking at a 4-color picture in the paper, that's actually 4 different plates that's composed of cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. And those all need to line up for you to be able to see people's eyeballs or make sure they don't have 2 heads. So that's all done on the plate maker.
And is the laser like abrading the surface? Is it cutting into the metal, or how is it making that image?
So there's 2 different processes. There's an additive or a removal. For the way we make plates, it burns the image onto the plate. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you burn the image off. We burn the image on. And the plates that we're using now are from Kodak, and they're what's called a develop on press or DOP plate. And what that means is we don't go through a chemical bath to develop the plate. The development process happens on the press. So by switching to these plates, we've cut out all the chemicals that were involved in the pre-press process. So you can just barely read the text, so you can see what color it is. So we load the right color plate on the right unit on the press. Otherwise, people start looking like aliens, or you have purple grass.
Oh, cool.
So can you tell us a little bit about the press?
Sure.
Just in like what is it? Like we're saying a few different things. Like what are the size of these plates? The press itself. Like I know that this is a huge machine. This isn't just like an office printer. This isn't just like the size of a little box. This is big. This is so we're talking about like some interesting proportions here.
Yeah. So the plates that we use, they're 24 inches tall by 36 inches wide. And they're 8 mils or 0.008 of an inch thick. So handling plates can be a tricky process because if you rub your finger on the edge, it's just like a knife blade. So we take the plates after they come out of the machine and we punch and bend them. So the punch process is to make sure that everything lines up exactly so that when we go to register, which is lining up all four plates together to have the image come out correctly. It's done because we've put punches in, and then the punches hold the plate when we bend it. So on the newspaper press, there's a bend on the plate on the lead edge, and every time the press rotates around, it kind of forces the plate further into the gap, so it holds it together. And then the tail end of the plate, we just tuck in and hold it. So Other presses, they'll usually have a bar that will actually hold the plate, but for our web press, it just holds in through forces of turning.
And when you say web press, that's because all of the pages are kind of printed in a continuous string and they're not cut yet. Is that correct?
Yeah, so a web press, when we print it, we're starting with the 1,000-pound rolls of paper. They're 33 inches wide, so they go onto the roll stands, and then the paper comes up into each unit as a continuous web of paper, and then it goes to the folder, and the folder folds it in half, and then another jaw comes, folds it in half again, and trims it.
Wow. And I think the part that it's difficult for me to conceptualize is how the plate gets turned into a color image on the paper.
Yeah.
Like, is there an inking process, or like what's going on there?
It's all just magic.
Yeah. We're not telling people about that process. We'll have to edit this out
So
now.
that's a secret.
Yeah, so we have the webs of paper and they come up, and so the color units that we have, they actually have 8 different printing units in a stack. Mm-hmm. So we use quad stacks. They're made by WebPress, which is a company out of Seattle, Washington, and the units weigh about 19,000 pounds a piece.
Gosh.
So we print what's called 4/4. So 4 color printing again is the cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. And so these quad stacks print 4 colors on each side of the web. So that's why there's 8 different printing units. So when we get the plates ready to go for, let's say the front section of the paper, which is typically 16 pages, we have 20 plates that are used to make that paper. We have 4 for the front web, so that would be pages 1 and 16. There'd be 4 plates for the back of that web, which would be 2 and 15. And then there'd be 4 more plates for 314 and 413.
Wow.
And then the black color ones are a little bit easier because there's only 1 plate. So so for our front section, we use 20 plates in order to print that section.
Wow. And they're all on the press at the same time, so it can all just be fed through and printed?
Yeah, so it'd be 4 different webs.
Yeah. And I think Johnathan mentioned earlier that the printing press is huge, but like huge is an understatement. It takes up a whole room of this warehouse type office.
Yeah. Do you
that we
know
have.
like how big it is?
I haven't measured it, but that portion of the building is 100 feet, and it goes, probably a good 70 of those feet for the press.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
So to get back to Molly's question about how it's actually printed, so the way plates work is when we're burning the image onto the plate, the coating that they use on the raw aluminum, it repels water. So when we go through the actual printing process, after the plates have cleaned up from developing on the press, the image repels water. And in offset printing, we have a combination of ink and water that it gets applied to the plate. So the image that we want to have, it repels the water, and then ink and water repel each other. So the ink is repelled off of the bare aluminum, but then sticks to the image. And then that image is offset onto a rubber blanket, and then the rubber blanket transfers the ink to the paper. So that's why it's called offset printing. It's offset from the plate to the blanket, and then the blanket to the paper.
Wow.
Rubber blanket. Is it just what it sounds like?
It is, but it's a little bit more complicated. So printing has pretty tight tolerances. So as the paper travels up through the press, we need to make sure that it's being pulled more at the top than it is at the bottom. Otherwise, you'll end up with extra paper in the middle of the press. So these blankets are made to exact thicknesses. So in our case, we use 66,000th blankets, and we put a little bit of packing in behind them, and we put less packing at the bottom than we do at the top. That way, the outer diameter of the top unit is a little bit bigger than the bottom, so it's pulling the paper a little harder at the top than the bottom. And it's kind of a delicate balance, because if you pull too hard, then shred the paper.
Yeah. I was just thinking a lot can go wrong. This sounds like a million parts. And also you need to get all the colors lined up perfectly, like you're saying. And there seems to be a lot of variables. So it's kind of amazing that it works every week.
Yeah. Printing is part art, part science, kind of like most things. You can, do an okay job, but to really get good at it, it takes time and practice and then identifying when something looks like it's wrong, whether it's a water problem or an ink problem or whatnot. So there's roughly 25 keys for each color unit, and that adjusts how much ink is going on in the area where that key is. So if someone looks a little bit too sunburnt and we want to take a little bit of the redness out of their face, it's a combination of magenta, which is a red color, and yellow that we're trying to take away. If someone looks really pale, or jaundicey, then it's just yellow that we need to remove.
Wow.
Or sometimes there might be the right amount of yellow it looks off because there's not enough blue or not enough black. So throughout the run, we're constantly pulling copies. We have different people that have different units that they're responsible for during the run. And we're constantly tweaking those inks as we run. We're checking on the registration. So again, since the plates aren't physically held together by a clamp, sometimes they might move a little bit during the run. So we're adjusting registration. So again, we have registration controls for each of the units. So on one stack, that's 8 different units. We have a circumferential, which is as the machine's rotating, that's the direction of rotation. We have side-to-side movement, and then we have a skew. So that would be if the plate is a little bit crooked, we can take some of that out.
Wow.
Wow. This is so you said that it's part art, part science, in that it takes a while to get, comfortable with this process. When did you start doing this process?
Printing in general.
Well, I understand that it's evolved over your lifetime, but when did we start printing like this? And then I'd love to hear about when you first interacted with the printing press.
So the units we installed that we're using right now for color, I believe we put in 2018, that time frame. We started printing offset here in Newcastle in 1981, 82 time frame. So our family and Booth Bay Register got together and we purchased a press out of Long Island, New York. It was called the King Press. It was moved up here, and it actually sat in the original part of the building, which was Grant Dairy, that my grandfather had bought from Norman Hunt. And then the extra building was added on later, and the press was moved out to the same area where our press sits now. I might have lost your question a little bit in
no,
my answer,
it's really so. This latest iteration is only about 6 years that we've been doing this, going on 7. How has your relationship with this iteration of the process been different versus the other ways that we've printed? Is this easier? Are there things about that you miss about the old ways we used to do it? Or are there things that we do better with this version? What is your relationship now with it compared to the other processes?
So the press is obviously different. We have a lot more color than we had before. So that is the piece that changes a little bit. So whenever you have color, it's more involved than when you're printing black and white. So in that regards, it's become more challenging to get everything correct. But as far as the fundamental properties of printing, that hasn't really changed on the press side. How we make the plates, our layout process, that's changed completely from what it was before. The room we're sitting in right now, which we still call layout, all the angled pieces of wood here, they were used for pasting up. And when we would physically take copy and we'd use a wax machine and wax on the copy and lay it out on sheets and then shoot it with a camera. So that's probably one of the biggest, differences is going to the digital realm. It's a lot less intensive to get to having the plates ready. Wow.
Yeah, we are, for our listeners, I'm going to take you on a little audio-visual journey. We are surrounded by slanted pieces of wood, or angled up, sort of like an architect's desk. It's really very cool, but that's not really what we use that for. Now, we do lay out papers on one side when we're going through our sheets. I don't know, what do we call those pieces? Our proofs.
Yeah,
our
when
proofs.
We're looking for mistakes.
We're looking for mistakes.
Like John said, it's helpful to have it printed out, but the actual process of moving words around on the page, Chris and Paula Roberts do that in design or on a computer, and so there's no need to use wax and glue sticks and scissors.
So is there, on the horizon, is there a move to something different in there, an evolution of the printing process that you're sort of looking at, or that you have envisioned coming down the line?
There's been a lot of talk in the industry of moving away from offset printing and kind of transitioning to like an inkjet form of printing. So that would provide, full variable data. So if someone wanted kind of like your social media news feed, if you were only interested in getting one type of news, then you could adapt that paper to the interests of the individual reader. Now, that's not what we would ever really get to, but as far as the inkjet piece, usually inkjet has a little bit higher cost per copy, but you don't have all the make ready. You don't have to develop the plates. You don't have to make the plates. It's just being printed directly on paper, and there's a little bit less waste. So for newspapers that have smaller circulations, going to like an inkjet type technology would probably be more efficient. For newspapers that are higher volumes, offset will still be more efficient.
Yeah, and there's something to be said, I think, for this is me who doesn't have to do it or worry about it, but the craft and the precision of the registration and all these steps that you're talking about, it's so unique and it's so particular to this kind of publication. It's really cool.
So it's a great point just about sort of the context of how other papers are produced. Smaller papers could do better with inkjet, the higher costs, so on. In the landscape of printing, this is a pretty standard procedure, offset printing. That's for people with a certain level of circulation that are trying to produce X amount. That is the standard, correct? Mm-hmm. Very cool.
Yeah, if you're talking about printing on newsprint, a lot of digital machines can't print on that lightweight paper. Newsprint's kind of one of the cheaper papers to produce and one of the lowest costs per size. So there's not a lot of other ways to print on that, either in the size or quantity that we're talking about. So, digital machines, they kind of want to be in the 11 by 17 size. And when we're printing tabs, you're printing twice that size, and that gets folded down. So there's not a lot of machines that have that technology yet, and the ones that do are extremely expensive.
To keep our paper the big size that's so characteristic, we need to do it this way.
The broad sheet.
Yes.
Yes. I presume most of our listeners have held our paper physically, but for those who haven't, it is a traditional size. It's a big size for this, like in modern standards, like a lot of papers you've seen sort of shrink horizontally. Ours is not. It is, kept its width, and that is an increasingly unique feature of our paper. The physical characteristics of our paper is sort of because of cost and process. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I mentioned a little bit earlier that we print on a 33-inch wide sheet of paper. So, when you're talking about traditional printing of especially like newspaper type products or magazines, people would say broadsheet, which is what we are, tab or tabloid, which would be half that size, and then there's digest, which would be half that size again. So that's how the folders are kind of set up on how many times it manipulates the paper to get to those different sizes. So with the press is physically a 36-inch press. So the max that we could print on is 36 inches. That's what the plates are. That's how wide a piece of paper can fit through the press. So 33 inches gives us a little bit of room on the edges to, allow things to clean up and not get dirty. And so when we go through the broadsheet process, it just gets folded in half. So as we're printing four pages on one web, and they get folded in half and then in half again. So that gets us 16 and a half inches is our width. The press has a fixed cutoff at 22 and 3/4 inches. So that's what our height is of each paper. So if we were to run a smaller web through, say, a 24 or 28 inch web, we'd reduce the number of columns, or we'd reduce the number of we'd reduce the size of the pages, and we'd reduce the amount of content that can go on the pages. So if we were to print a paper that had the same amount of content that we print now in say 28 pages, if we shrunk the web size down, that would mean we'd have to increase the number of pages in order to have the same content.
Would that increase the length of the process too?
So at some point, we would have to add another run. So that's a whole nother set of make ready. That's a whole nother set of plates. That's a whole nother run on the press. So that's hours time. And ultimately you always lose a little bit on the edges. So the bigger parent sheet you can have, the more efficient use of that paper you have. So the size we are running is, more efficient than if we were to drop down to, say, a 28 or inch web like some of the other newspapers in the state have.
Wow.
That's very cool, because I'm sure there are some folks that pick up the paper and are really interested to know, what is, why have a paper this wide? Like, why do we, because like we said, it's an increasingly rare dimension in the newspaper industry. So it's really cool, and to hear about the process of that, So with that,
yeah, I think I am curious just hearing you talk about all these steps and how involved it is. If you guys have had any memorable mishaps in the printing process that you'd like to tell us about, because we know that it doesn't always go perfectly.
Memorable mishaps.
Yeah.
It's our new segment.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think we have enough time to talk about all of them. Some of the more common ones are for whatever reason a web might break. So I haven't got to the point of really talking about the speed that we run at, but our press and our waters and our balance are all kind of set up around running at one speed, and that speed's usually around 16,000 an hour.
16,000 what an hour?
16,000 impressions, which would be 16,000 copies.
Wow.
So if we had full rolls on and we ran for an hour, we'd end up with 16,000 copies of whatever we were printing.
Wow.
So what is how many papers on average do we print a week?
For us?
For us, yeah. Sorry, I know that's another little part. We publish or print a lot of other papers.
Yeah, so we're printing somewhere between 6,500 and 7,500, depending on the time of year.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
And this time of year, especially, we're 2 sections, so there's, we're printing, if we're printing 6,500 in the winter, that's 13,000. Impressions between the 2 sections.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was talking about web break, we're running at a pretty high speed. If you were to figure out the speed that the web is traveling, you'd take 16,000 and multiply it by 22 and 3/4 inches, and that's divided by an hour, that's the length that it's traveling, per hour. It ends up being, a pretty brisk walk. So the paper is moving, about as you could walk along with it, but you have to be walking pretty good to keep up with it. So if a web breaks, the press doesn't stop instantly. That paper just starts going somewhere. And the tension that the folder pulls on the paper is what keeps it moving forward. So when that's lost, the ink on the blankets kind of suck the paper back in, and we get webs wrapped up, and
oh gosh,
or it can slip into the gears or different. So web breaks or running out of paper are probably the more common mishaps, and they can be pretty devastating if you don't catch them quick enough.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm imagining like spools of paper just going wild, and also on print day, everybody who works on the press floor has usually got ink all over their arms, and like we have special soap here for cleaning up ink that I had never seen before coming here. So I'm just imagining that it could be quite a debacle, quite a mess.
Yeah, the other thing that's common is our roll stands have brakes on them. It's a braking system because you have 1,000-pound roll and it's spinning at a pretty decent speed. There's a lot of energy there. So we actually have a brake system that's identical to a rotor brake on a car that are attached to the webs, and that's for when we slow down so that the roll slows down and we keep tension, because if you don't have tension on the rolls, they tend to wander and move. So if someone forgets to put the brake on when we start up, that's another common issue. And if we don't recognize it before we shut down, if anyone's ever casted with an open face reel fishing and forgets to put their thumb on the reel, then the bird's nest that results can be very large. Yeah, because you just have this roll that just keeps spinning because no one's slowing it down. So
all gas, no brakes.
And the press isn't taking the paper, so it just kind of forms this big bird's nest of paper.
Goodness.
Sounds
I wish everyone could see the look on Jonathan's face.
It's giving me anxiety hearing about that, but also watching like kites in the sky gives me anxiety. It's just like things that are sort of out of my control, and like watching that feels like I would just have to watch. It would just
as you would with a 20-foot tall machine with a big spool of paper coming loose on it. Make you upset. Me too.
Yeah. Wow.
I feel lucky to work here and have learned about this process, because I feel like it's something you see a newspaper at the store and you take it for granted that there are all these steps and all this attention that needs to be paid to how the image is even produced and the words laid out and all the steps. So we're lucky.
And we're a print first newspaper, and that's something that I know is really a core part of our identity and even our ideology here at the paper. What is the significance of being a print first newspaper? What does that mean to you?
Well, I don't really like that term, but
the print first newspaper?
I mean, because we do put breaking news up on the website and stuff like that before it goes in the paper. But you nailed the philosophy, which is our concentrations on the print product. So the reason for that is advertising makes up the majority of what our income is. So we need to make sure that the advertisers are getting the best value that they can, and they really do that with the physical newspaper product. So if people read the stories online, that's great. They're getting informed, knowing what's happening. But if they're reading that story and they're not picking up the newspaper, then they're not really being exposed to the advertisers that are really, I guess, paying the bills, so to say. So by having this focus on the physical newspaper, it's because that's where the revenue comes in. That's how we keep the lights on. That's how we keep the editorial staff
Employed.
Thank you.
So, what some of the larger papers have done, they can go to a subscriber-based model, and we've similar to the width of the paper, we've had other items brought up during surveys or conversations with people in public about, I don't want to pay more for an online-only subscription. It costs you nothing. Well, it doesn't cost us nothing. That information costs a lot to gather. It's not cheap to sit through a 5-hour meeting for your 800-word story.
Yeah, financially, mentally, it's it's not cheap.
So going out and interviewing or traveling to different places, it all costs money. So if we were to actually go to a completely subscription-based model, whether it be digital or newspaper, the cost driver is labor, and we're not charging nearly enough for especially digital subscriptions to pay for the respective portion of that labor, I guess. So, so that's one of the reasons. We also don't have a wide enough audience to go to a subscription-based model because there's just not enough people interested in what happens in Lincoln County, Maine to make up for all the other revenue.
That's their loss, though.
Yeah, right.
It is. I don't know where we put them, but
Yeah.
Well, you can subscribe to the Lincoln County News outside of Lincoln County. And it is really cool just to hear about our reader base, which does extend beyond the county. And a lot of it is people who some are here or are interested or have a history here. They keep tabs wherever they are in the world. And
We'll mail it to you.
we'll mail it to you.
and what always amazes me when I talk to people or look at survey results or stuff like that is the number of people that literally want to read the paper from front to back all the way through. And that experience isn't something you can get on your phone or on your computer or on your tablet. Even if we put the PDFs like we do the
Right.
online edition of the paper, it's not the same experience as handling the paper and reading it how a newspaper is meant to be read, which is a physical copy.
Yeah.
Yeah, you want your shoulders to get a good workout. Lincoln County residents have the best shoulders in Maine. Holding open the broadsheet. Well, John, thank you so much for stopping in today and taking some time to explain to us and the listeners of the podcast the process of putting together the paper and a little bit of its importance about how and why we do this.
Thank you, guys. It was a pleasure to sit here again.
Absolutely. We'll have you back soon.
It's been a real treat having all three of you here. As Johnathan mentioned, it's kind of rare that we get to have all three reporters in a recording session at once. And so taking advantage of that, I was wondering if you guys could look back on the 52 papers that you've all been involved with over the year and talk about your favorite stories of each other's.
Oh, geez.
I know, right?
Gotta get my thinking cap on now.
Well, for those who don't know, this week's paper is what we consider a Christmas edition. So we'll run a Christmas message on the front page of the paper, as we always traditionally have. But the following week is our New Year's edition, where we run a year in review, where it's all of the major headlines that have happened over the year. But I also know that you all have stuff of each other's that you admire. And so I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that.
I know something of Piper's.
Go for it.
Oh, God, what did I do?
Well, we've been grappling with how to cover a proposed an OSHA proposed update to the fire department and emergency responder standards, which is a huge deal. And it's something that is affecting fire departments, or could affect, it's a proposed rule, fire departments all around the country. And so I think we started hearing about it maybe in the spring when fire chiefs would come into select board meetings and be like, hey, listen up, like, we're concerned. And there's this thing in the works. But it seemed it's a huge document. It's a huge document, first of all. There's a lot of pages, a lot of jargon. It's a huge thing to approach. But that didn't scare Piper. And she was just like, I want to learn about this because it's going to affect us. And she did.
Yeah, I mean, thank you. I mean, like you said, these fire chiefs were coming in and being like, hey, guys, we really need to, like, start talking about this. And, I mean, I think a lot of people didn't really think that anything was going to happen with it, at least anytime soon. But these guys were pretty adamant that they wanted people to know about it and what it could do to local departments. So I was like, hey, I'm going to tell you what it's going to do.
What was the process like of reporting that, especially when you have so many fire departments here, such a long document? Like, what were your steps that you took?
Yeah, well, I was like, it's going to take me a million years to read this document. And so there was kind of this open comment period where a bunch of people could quite literally comment what they thought of the proposed standards. So I went in there and I looked through hundreds of thousands of comments for Lincoln County people, Lincoln County fire personnel. And then I was like, hey, I saw you commented on this. Let's talk about it. And, you know, I ended up talking to quite a few. You know, it's one of those situations where you wish you could talk to everybody and you wish you could cover every single thing that is within these standards, but it's just so much.
Totally. And I'm realizing now I didn't really describe what the rule would entail. So do you want to go into that a little bit?
I mean, yeah. So it's been a minute. So
very broadly, like what, I suppose if people aren't familiar with this and they haven't heard.
Yeah. I mean, long story short, the proposed standards would require departments to go through additional training, additional purchasing of equipment. It would require equipment to be replaced sooner than it usually has been. And all in all, the standards were making a lot of people nervous that volunteers would no longer be suitable for the roles that they held because they didn't have these courses that are now going to be required under their belts. So, you know, there was a lot of nerves about budgets and personnel and essentially how could local departments like the ones we have in Lincoln County stay running when all these things are threatening, you know, what we do here.
Huge questions.
Yeah.
I really liked how you covered that. I was very impressed.
Thank you. You're reminding me. I got to check in on how that's doing now.
Yeah.
I don't really know where we're at right now with OSHA and those standards.
I don't know, but I think last I heard, they keep pushing the comment
They do
deadline
keep
back.
pushing it. Yeah. So got to check on that.
Yeah, you know, since we're talking about Piper,
Oh gosh.
Right now, it's hard to narrow down. Like, it's not really there's not really a specific piece that I've, you know, you're doing a fantastic job. It has been watching your sort of evolution as a reporter in the last year, because both of you guys started not this past October, but the October previous. So this past year has been sort of the bulk of your time at the Lincoln County News, and watching you, Piper, specifically sort of develop this acumen for like court reporting or like going into those records. And I mean, that's not something that in my time here I've really cared to do, but that's something that you're like drawn to and you're good at it. And so watching you sort of not just dive in to that subject, but at the same time broadening your abilities at the paper, you know, with doing, you know, notable death pieces, and you took a crack at an editorial recently. So it's really cool to watch you sort of kind of blossom as a reporter. So it's not just one piece, it's the many pieces that make up this mosaic of your journey as a reporter, because you graduated from you graduated. Where did you graduate from again? I'm sorry.
Keene State College.
Keene State College. That's right. You graduated in
2023, May 2023.
Yeah, and you know, within a few months, you were here at the paper, so that's a pretty quick transition.
Yeah, and I was freaking terrified.
Yeah, and you came to us with you already had won a couple of awards from the New Hampshire Press Association, which are plaques in our office. So
you told me to put them up.
Oh, I know. Good. I'm so excited. It's not critique at all. But
and that was for sports reporting. So this was like a totally new ball game, getting into municipal stuff and court stuff and everything that makes up a community.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. You almost made me cry just now.
I'll try harder next time.
This is a dangerous
didn't
question.
You start this?
It is. Keep it moving. Come on.
Oh.
Don't make people cry. Don't make people cry. Move it along.
Well, I want to compliment Johnathan.
Okay.
Molly's like jumping right on this. I love it.
I think that we all know that Johnathan, his connections to the community have made him like the perfect person to write characters of the county pieces. But not only those, which tend to be very positive, but also the more difficult moments, like the burning of Schooner Landing. Johnathan had to cover that as a former employee of multiple years. And I think to see how you took a really difficult situation where you woke up in the night and like a dear institution to you was literally engulfed in flames. And then you made work out of that and did a beautiful job. That was very impressive. And I think it's it's a very good example for us to see and to learn from. So.
Yeah, as well as the January storm supplement. You know, I saw how much work you put into that.
That was this year. That's wild.
The miles that you drove.
Yeah, so when
to cover the wreckage that these storms left, and you know all the work that you did tracking how people were rebuilding after that. Yeah, it was a true moment where you see how a community comes together, and your work covering that was really quite beautiful.
Thank you. It's one of the beautiful and devastating things about love, which is when you love, you get to love. And so when things happen to things that you love, you care. And that's just, it's part of the privilege, but it's also part of the cost of entry to caring. So
I suppose.
Yeah. So,
it's a serious
really cool
skill when it comes to journalism to be able to still maintain that level of care and be that close to the things you're writing about and yet still produce something really informative and, appropriate for our publication.
Well, thank you guys. It was, I hope we pump the brakes next year on our local disasters.
Yeah, let's get him back in the happy news.
Yeah. Well, Molly, it's more general. I don't have like a specific piece. I mean, both of you have written character pieces that I've really loved. But like stylistically, there are things that you do just like with your hyphens and like moving things around that like I learned from a lot. And so like just sitting courtside, to Piper's development as a journalist, I'm also sitting courtside to you as a journalist and I'm learning from you. I'm learning from both of you. But Molly, you seem to have this incredible, this desire to speak about the people and also the animals of Lincoln County. And and thematically, that's really nice. But in the way that you engage with Hedgehog, and then that I can kind of see that translate to the way that you engage with material of our mammalian and animalian counterparts speaks to sort of the kindness and softness that we want in people. And I think that we're lucky to have both of you, because you both present both a softness and an eagerness to help this community see reflections of itself on the broadsheet. And it's been incredible to watch and learn from both of you.
Thank you. I feel the same way about you guys. We're very lucky. We have a very good dynamic in our newsroom, and I'm grateful for it all the time.
Also, can we just talk about your Timberwolf coverage real quick?
Oh, gosh.
Oh, yeah.
Because you said animals, and that immediately made me think of that. And I admired how you handled that situation, because it was kind of a tricky one, if I recall.
Yes, there was a lot of like emerging information, I would say. Yeah.
But you were calm, cool, and collected, and you got that thing done.
Thank you.
And I thought it was very well put together. One of the many great things that you have produced. I can't even recall everything that we have done this year.
Thank you, Piper.
Nor should you. That is beyond the means of real human capacity.
Which is why I'm going to give very specific examples right now.
Amazing.
Oh,
yes. For me, like Johnathan has said, it's been wonderful to watch you all grow over the past year. Some notable highlights for each of you. Piper, like, I know one of the very, I wouldn't call it fun, but a big part of our job is local elections, and that includes state representatives and state senators. And so in the lead up to every election, we have to do profiles on them. And this was, I believe, the first year you all had to write them. And Piper, through a series of events, we had to move a piece out of order. And I asked Piper on Tuesday if she could turn around not one, but 2 candidate profiles so we could put them on the front page within 12 hours. And
after she asked me that, I went to sleep.
But not only did she do it, she did it well, to the point at which, like, I was basically moving commas. Like, they were wonderful. And yeah, so... And then I had you do one of the candidate forums. You knocked it out of the park, so that when there was another opening, I was like, hey, I want you to do this. So it was really awesome to see you shine there.
Thank you.
Johnathan Riley. It's already been mentioned about your coverage of the January 2024 back-to-back storms and how incredible that was. Also, the schooner landing fire. But what I've really grown to appreciate is your dedication to following up. Like, with the January storms, I want to say we had an article about an aspect of the storm for about 2 months following it. It was like, here's this family's 100-year-old dock. Here's what is going on with the contented soul, and so on and so forth. And so... I know in 100 years, when someone's looking back and doing research, as we've all done in our archives, they're going to really appreciate your tenacity to following the story through, because I know I do. So,
thanks.
Yeah. And as for Molly Rains, I have one example that hasn't run yet, but I'm very excited about it. You have a way to writing leads and like getting into features that is just very natural. I've compared it before, like, you know, part of journalism is knowing the rules. And once you know the rules, it's about breaking them effectively. And so one of the pieces you wrote last year was about the Wiscasset Dungeons and Dragons Club. And that piece did an excellent job of like setting the stage, like really putting the reader within the atmosphere. So for this year's 2024's favorite, it's actually something that will be in the December 26th edition.
Oh boy.
Because it's about the Madomic Valley Outdoor Club.
Aww.
And that was one that I was like, oh, we need to hold this so that I can really breathe, because I really hope everybody reads it. But there's great, just, you have the teacher's perspective, you have the student's perspective, and you know, I'm really glad that we didn't have to be out there camping in 20-degree weather, but you did a great job of like really putting the readers in that atmosphere with that. So
thank you, Maya. I appreciate that. Yeah. I was in that 20-degree atmosphere.
I know. Thankfully, you didn't have to stay out overnight, but there's a detail you include about 3 of the students in there, and I'm like, oh, to be a teenager and think you're invincible.
They slept on the floor outside, on the ground outside, and I said, why? And they were like, the cabin was too hot.
Wow. So they went to teenage degree weather.
But thank you, Maya. That means a lot.
Yeah.
Aw, now I'm feeling emotional.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I made you all get warm and fuzzy.
And this has been Beyond the Broadsheet. Thank you for listening to Beyond the Broadsheet, a podcast by the Lincoln County News. Production support is provided by Tyler Davis of Tyality Productions. Theme music by Stu Mahan and Sherwood Olin.
Have a question or a suggestion? Email us at info@lcnme.com. And if you haven't already, please be sure to rate and subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen.
This has been a Lincoln County Publishing Company production.